On the night of June 12, 1944, Lancaster KB726 VR-A of 419 Squadron took off on its fateful mission. Just after midnight on the 13th, their aircraft was attacked by enemy fighters, which knocked out both port engines and started a fire between the upper and rear turrets. When the order came to bail out, Andrew Mynarski left the upper turret and headed toward the rear escape hatch. There he saw that Pat Bropey, the rear gunner, was trapped in his turret, unable to escape. Without hesitation, he made his way through the flames in an attempt to free the rear gunner. After trying without success, the rear gunner indicated to him that he should try to save his own life. Reluctantly, he went back through the flames to the escape hatch. There, as a last gesture to his friend, he turned, stood to attention in his flaming clothing, and saluted before jumping out of the aircraft. He was eventually found by French farmers, but was so severely burned that he died from his injuries. The rear gunner, Pat Bropey, miraculously escaped when the aircraft crashed. He subsequently testified that if Andrew Mynarski had not attempted to save his life, Mynarski could have escaped safely from the burning aircraft. For his most conspicuous act of heroism, Pilot Officer Andrew Mynarski was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross, the Commonwealth's highest award for valor. On September 24, 1988, 44 years after Andrew Mynarski gave his life trying to save a friend, the crew of KB726 VR-A gathered at the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum in Hamilton, Ontario, to attend the dedication ceremonies of the Mynarski Memorial Lancaster. In attendance, along with the rest of the crew, was Pat Bropey, whom Andrew Mynarski had tried to rescue. After the ceremonies, he recounted the events of that night 44 years ago.
Clothing was all in flame. I indicated he couldn't do anything. But he crawled back, his hands and knees, came to attention, saluted me, and I'm sure he said, "Good night, sir." And he jumped. I just turned around and happened to land when the aircraft came to a sudden jerk when the starboard wing hit a tree. It released the turret, threw me about 20, 30 feet. I took my parachute off, threw it into the burning flames, and headed out through the French underground.
The Mynarski Memorial Lancaster is an aircraft restoration project that has taken 9 years. Over those years, tens of thousands of hours of work have been put in by dedicated volunteers. Also, over 4,000 people from around the world have joined the Lancaster Support Club to lend their financial support to the restoration project. Businesses, both large and small, have also given of their time and expertise in overhauling, remanufacturing, and donating parts and services to the project. Over the years, it appeared at times that the Lancaster would never be completed because of numerous setbacks as new problems continued to develop. But the problems were overcome, and on Sunday, September 11, 1988, Lancaster KB726 VR-A was ready for the air. Like the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum's restoration project, there were times back in 1940 when it looked as if the Lancaster might never come to be. The Lancaster's true beginning stretches back to 1936, when the British Air Ministry outlined its requirements for a new generation of medium and heavy bombers. One of the firms chosen to submit a proposal was Avro and Company. Mr. Roy Chadwick headed up the design team on what was to become the Manchester bomber. It first flew in July 1939, but the Manchester proved to be much less than an unqualified success. It was powered by two 24-cylinder Rolls-Royce Vulture engines, which were of a new design. These engines were found to be inadequate for the size and weight of the aircraft, and thus performance was poor. Also, the new Vulture engines were proving to be totally unreliable. Thus, in the summer of 1940, Roy Chadwick and his Avro design team modified the basically sound Manchester airframe to take four Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, which had already proven themselves in the Hurricane and Spitfire fighters. Thus was born out of failure the Lancaster, supreme British bomber of World War II. Many aircraft during the war became famous, but few were truly great. Greatness was a quality that could not be instilled in an aircraft on the drawing board. A great aircraft had to have that touch of genius that exceeds just good. It must have flying qualities that were above average, in addition to reliability, fighting strength, and the ability to take punishment. All of these qualities the Lancaster had in good measure. But most important, it had to earn the trust of its crew, the major link in any great aircraft. With the crew's determination and courage, the Lancaster was pushed to this greatness. Like so many good planes, the essence of the Lancaster's design was its simplicity and robust structure. Both these features proved to be ideally suited to mass production. It was also remarkably adaptable, as evidenced by its many roles, such as the famous Dam Buster raid, through to the carrying of the 11-ton Grand Slam bomb. In 1942, as production of the Lancaster at British factories continued, plans were being formulated for the construction of the Lancaster in Canada. A year later, on August 1st, 1943, the first Lancaster rolled off the assembly line at the Victory Aircraft plant at Malton, near Toronto. This first Lancaster was named the Ruhr Express and was to become famous with its starring role in the National Film Board production Target Berlin, which was released in 1944.
Yes?
Here's your radiogram now, sir.
Go ahead.
It reads, Canadian production, Avro Lancaster bombers, confirmation effective as from today.
Okay. Hey, if you fellas heard the news, we're going to build 4 motor bombers.
Oh, yeah?
I tell you, it's true. We're going to build them right here in this plant.
The biggest long-range bomber in the world.
Yeah, it carries 8 tons of bombs.
Sure, we can build them. Well, we couldn't have built them a couple of years ago, but we can now.
Yes, we can build the biggest bombers now. We've got the materials, aluminum from Arvida, nickel from Sudbury, magnesium from Haley, supply trains running day and night from distant raw material sources to the assembly plants. All we need now is the tools.
Sure, we can handle the job, but we've got to have machine tools and plenty of them. Do I need many? Brother, the tools I haven't got, you could just about squeeze into Varsity Stadium. I know they're scarce, but it takes 10,000 jigs and tools to turn out an aircraft the size of the Lancaster. There are 55,000 parts in that plane, and we hope to make more than half of them right here in the plant. Yes, we'll subcontract the rest all over the country. We've got parts coming in all day long.
From Toronto, Montreal, Brantford, Hamilton, day and night the telephones ring, the parts come rolling in, the blueprints from the drafting offices, 20 tons of them. rushed in by Bomber, worked over by the engineers and designers, broken down into production flow patterns. They don't look like much when you see them reduced to a few thin sheets of microfilm. But study them a little while, and you'll see that you'll need thousands of men to put that plane into regular production. Thousands of skills, and among them 300 of the rarest of all, the key men of mass production, tool makers.
All the tool makers you can get. Want to see me? Yes, Jack. I've got 30 tool makers and I need 300. 300? Where are you going to get them? Can you spare me any men from production? Not real tool makers. Well, they don't have to be. If they can handle a drill or know how to handle a file, send them over. We'll make tool makers out of them.
And we made tool makers out of them. Farmers, laborers, men from converted industries, even housewives. And while we were training the men and women, while we were building all the jigs and tools we could, we went after the special machines we couldn't make.
Look, we're tooling up for Lancaster production, and we need spar milling machines. When can you make delivery? Priority? Yes, we've got a triple-plated grade A priority on everything we need.
That's how we went to work. First came the jigs and dies. To the aircraft, what the mold is to a coin. But as the new coin is only the first of thousands, so our first fuselage parts were soon followed by others on the flow production line. We call it a marriage when the three parts of the fuselage are joined for the first time. But it's not until the wings are joined that the plane can take off for battle. It's the four engines with their 5,000 horsepower that help her to outrange and outfly the enemy's fighters at 4 times the speed of an express train. She needs good engines and air screws in this final battle for the air of Europe. In that battle, she can't afford to have blind spots, so our girls check the tail turret that guards the lives of 7 men. No plane in the world carries more bombs than this. You can pack a whole Spitfire into its bomb bay. It carries 15,000 pounds of bombs, more than 3 Wellingtons together. It's a night bomber, and in a raid, it's got to be blacked out like a house. Seats in a battle plane don't have to be upholstered. They've got to be armored, and the men and women who build them carry the lives of the crew in their hands. We used to wonder if every small part was worth all the care and trouble we gave it. But then someone would remind us that a plane's whole mission depended on every part, and on the hidden parts most of all. Finally, we gave the ship her first name. Nothing fancy, just KB700, a production number as plain and businesslike as the machine that was to carry the name into battle. Yes, she was nearly ready for battle. And as we looked at that long, slender plane, we thought of all the work we'd put into it, the months of effort, and now the reward. Some had doubted that the thing could be done, but we knew we could do it. A Canadian job, needing only a Canadian crew. And there they were, right in our plant, everyone a veteran of more than 30 operational flights, some of them flown to Canada a few minutes after their return from a raid on Europe. We got talking to those boys, and we made friends with them. They'd come together from the coast, the prairies, the east, to make up a crew, just as we'd come from all over Canada to make up a plane. And somehow, as we talked, the plane became a cross-section and symbol of all Canada. The last day before the plane was ready for its flight, we had a party at the plant, open house for everyone. The girls and fellas showing each other the job they'd done on the big ship. And as the dawn broke over the roofs of the plant, we took our big plane out of her hangar slowly onto the gray concrete runway. Remember, this was to be our last contact with her. To us, she was a living thing. When the test flights were done, the crew took over, anxious to be on their way. They had picked up one more crew member in Canada, a white Scottish Canadian, Saskatchewan born. They called him B for Bambi.
Starboard inner, couch away. Wheels up, wheels coming up. Climbing power, 2850, flip, flip.
In the low, slanting light of dawn, the men in the plane saw the farms of Ontario unfolding below them like a map.
First course, 087 degrees, 087 degrees.
Then, as the navigator set his course for England, the coast of the Maritimes gave way to the gray Atlantic. The boys kidded among themselves as they crossed the ice floes way out at sea.
I wonder who's taking Joyce out tonight. I don't know. She probably wasn't going to meet Mike anyway. Oh, yeah? You guys are just jealous because she wouldn't give you a tumble.
It was cold at 7,000 feet over the Atlantic above the clouds. At dawn, when the sun came out, they went down a few thousand feet to get warm. Then suddenly, the meadows of old England, as gently they eased her down to journey's end. Back at their station, spot on at 10 a.m., with 350 gallons of gas still left in their tanks, to be welcomed by their senior officer overseas and by Canada's High Commissioner. Soon they heard Sir Stafford Cripps, Britain's Minister of Aircraft Production, telling them what England thought of their plane.
Recently, we've received from the hands of the Canadian workers their first Lancaster bomber to be sent to this country. It's a magnificent plane, up to the highest standards of production and performance. We hope it's the first of a very long series, which will fly quickly to the aerodromes of this country and load up with bombs for Germany.
And so it did when Johnny Fauquier from Ottawa, hero of many Canadian air battles, briefed the men of the Canadian Lancaster squadrons.
Our target tonight, Berlin. Germany is groggy and reeling. If you put the same effort into this attack tonight as you did into Hamburg, when you smashed Hamburg, You'll deal the enemy a blow from which they may well find it impossible to recover. Remember, bomb aimers, the pilots are depending on you to take them right into the aiming point. Now, it's up to you, men. Good luck to you, and off you go.
How's the kite, Chiefy? All set, sir. We'll smarten up this trip. 2-to-1 on a watch off a scrub tonight. I'll take you 2-to-1. If we're scrubbed tonight, I hope it's in time to make the local pub. Bait the government out of an egg tonight.
The Battle of France, the Battle of Britain, the Battle of the Mediterranean, and now the Battle of Europe. 1,000 planes, 7,000 men, 5 million pounds of bombs hurled against targets 600 miles away. KB700 took off into the English night, back home more than 2,000 miles away across the sea. We heard that she had a new name now, Q for Queenie.
Tonight, the radio stations of Germany have gone off the air again, as the largest air raid in history is moving to its climax.
Hey, listen to this, fellas.
More than 1,000 British and Canadian heavy bombers are over Berlin again. And among them is the first Canadian-built Lancaster bomber.
Why, that's our baby.
Hey, have you heard the news? Q for Queenie, bomb Berlin.
Q for Queenie, what's that?
Don't you remember? KB700, our first baby.
On course. Okay. Oxygen on. Everybody getting oxygen? Bomb aimer okay. Wireless off okay, Skip. Navigator doing fine. Engineer all set. Mid-upper okay. Rear gunner okay. On track. Okay, fella. Bomb fuse, nose and tail. Guns cock and check. Okay, what's the temperature? Minus 25. Hey, Skip, what's your speed and height? 160, 18,500. How are we doing for time? Okay, on time. Flag bursting, 9 o'clock. Keep your eyes open, fella. What do you think I'm doing? Picking flowers? Get weaving, bum.
Tonight, tomorrow night, every night, till the job is done.
Following its starring role in Target Berlin, the Ruhr Express continued its service in the RCAF. One of its first assignments was with number 405 Squadron RCAF, which was attached to number 8 Pathfinder Group. In the Pathfinder Group, it flew a number of missions locating and marking targets. At the end of April 1944, the Ruhr Express was reassigned to number 419 Squadron. There it served for 9 months until January 2nd, 1945, when after returning from its 50th sortie, it overshot the end of the runway and collided with a tractor and was burned out. Luckily, the crew escaped without injuries. Of all the Lancaster's exploits, none was more famous than the raid on the Moen, Eder, and Sorpe dams in the Ruhr Valley by number 617 Squadron, the Dam Busters. For that raid, the squadron's Lancasters were specially modified to carry the spinning bomb designed by Barnes-Wallis. Another highlight of the Lancaster's career was the sinking of the German battleship Tirpitz on November 12, 1944, in a Norwegian fjord. For the attack on the Tirpitz, 31 aircraft from number 617 and number 9 squadrons took part in the raid. Each aircraft carried a 12,000-pound tallboy bomb. Even though the Lancaster proved to be one of the most successful bombers of the war, this success did not guarantee immunity from losses. Of the over 7,300 Lancasters built during the war, more than 3,600 were lost on operations. Number 419 Squadron alone lost 129 aircraft, more than 5 times its normal squadron strength. But more disturbing was the tremendous loss of life, especially in Bomber Command. Of the total 18,436 RCAF casualties during the war, close to 10,000 of the deaths were sustained in squadrons assigned to Bomber Command. Overall, within Bomber Command, more than 60% of the flight crews did not survive the war. By the end of the war in Europe, there were 58 squadrons wholly equipped with Lancasters, including 8 squadrons of Group 6 RCAF. The Lancaster's last operational bombing mission took place on April 25, 1945, when U-boat fuel tanks at Vallo, Norway were bombed. 4 days later, they were again called upon, but this time it was food, not bombs they were dropping. Under the code name Operation Manna, 6,500 tons of food were dropped in 10 days over Holland to help feed thousands of starving Dutch. It was on this happier note that the war for the mighty Lancaster ended. Following VE Day, 8 RCAF bomber squadrons were assigned to Tiger Force, which was being established to step up the war against Japan. In all, 165 Lancasters were ferried back to Canada for this purpose. But Japan's surrender in August 1945 negated this purpose, and many were sold for scrap shortly after the end of the war. However, more than 70 Lancasters were saved and modified for a number of different RCAF roles. The first of these modifications began in 1946 at Avro Aircraft, with the photographic reconnaissance version, of which 22 were completed. Of all the modified Lancasters, the most widely used modification was the maritime reconnaissance and patrol aircraft. A small number of these were also modified for use by search and rescue units on the east and west coasts. One of the wartime Lancasters was also specially modified by Avro Aircraft for its own use as the test vehicle for the Arenda jet engine development program. It had the 2 outboard Merlins replaced by Arenda engines, which were being tested for use in the CF-100. In January 1949, number 408 Squadron was reformed at Rockcliffe Air Base to continue the air photo mapping work begun by 413 and 414 squadrons after the war. The squadron was equipped with 8 Lancasters and a number of Canso and Norseman aircraft. With 408 Squadron, the Lancaster would serve for another 15 years, performing air photo and reconnaissance work throughout northern Canada. In the early 1960s, the RCAF commissioned the production of the film Air Survey to recognize the work of the squadron. By the latter 1950s, most of the maritime patrol and reconnaissance Lancasters had been replaced by the Lockheed Neptune and Canadair Argus for patrol work. At the time they were withdrawn, most were just scrapped. Number 408 Squadron continued to use the Lancaster up until the mid-60s, when the squadron's last Lancaster was retired from service on April 1st, 1964. As the last remaining Lancasters were struck from service, many just went to scrapyards, but a few were saved for memorials. Lancaster FM 104 was placed on a pedestal on the Toronto waterfront, and others soon appeared as monuments at places such as Windsor, Ontario, Greenwood, Nova Scotia, and Calgary, Alberta. One aircraft restored in the markings of KB726 from 428 Squadron was put on display at the National Aviation Museum in Ottawa. Lancaster FM 213, which was stationed at Torbay, Newfoundland with 107 Search and Rescue Unit, would end up as a memorial at Goderich, Ontario. Over the following years, most would be left to the elements and deteriorate badly. Although interested in the restoration and preservation of other World War II aircraft, the members of Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum felt the Lancaster would be the most appropriate memorial to the heroic deeds of Andrew Mynarski and to all those who served in the RCAF during World War II. So in 1977, they began their search for a Lancaster suitable for restoration. Lancaster FM 213, which had been on display as a memorial in Goderich for 13 years, was assessed and found to be in restorable condition. Although restorable, it was still in poor condition due to damage caused by vandalism and the elements over the years. After its purchase from the Royal Canadian Legion in Goderich, the museum volunteers began the slow process of dismantling and transporting the aircraft. By 1979, all the engines and most of the wing sections had been removed, and it was light enough for a Canadian Forces Chinook helicopter to lift. So on November 10, 1979, the fuselage section was ferried to the museum at Mount Hope. Upon its arrival, work started on paint stripping, removal of post-war equipment, and cataloging of parts. But it wasn't until March 1983 that the real restoration work actually began, when the museum received a grant from the Ontario government to hire and train 5 people in aircraft repair. In 1984, the museum was able to purchase an additional hangar, which greatly improved the space available for restoration work. At this point, work began in earnest, with the aircraft being completely stripped of its major components. By early 1985, the wings had been completely rebuilt and reattached to the center section. The tailplane had been restored and remounted, and the bomb bay doors rebuilt. The cockpit was completely stripped of instrumentation, repainted, and new or reconditioned instruments reinstalled. All the hydraulic, electrical, and pneumatic systems were overhauled or replaced. It was becoming almost a never-ending job of remove, repair, and reinstall. As each problem was overcome, there were new ones. But through the dedication and skill of the Lancaster Restoration Group, these too were solved. By the time of the 1987 Hamilton Air Show, 2 engines had been completely rebuilt and installed. Up close, the intricate detail of the engines was clearly visible. The cockpit canopy was also complete, along with the cockpit interior. A year later, at the June 1988 Air Show, the Lancaster was almost complete. Interest in the plane was enormous, particularly from those who'd followed the progress through the many painstaking years of restoration. They could now see that what had seemed impossible was becoming a reality. As at many previous air shows, members of the Lancaster Support Club were at work answering questions and just having a good time. After the air show, work again began in earnest as the official dedication and flight ceremonies of September 24th were fast approaching. By late July, volunteers had spent hundreds of hours cleaning all the exterior to bare metal, readying it for painting. Then, after 43 hours of painting, 351 liters of paint, 2,300 square meters of masking paper, and almost 100 rolls of masking tape, Lancaster VR-A rolled from the hangar. As September 24th grew nearer, the volunteers worked long hours to ready the Lanc for its first flight in 24 years. Then on Sunday, September 11th, with pilots Tony Banfield and Bob Hill at the controls, the Mynarski Lancaster was ready for the air. Upon its return, there were a few problems to be attended to, but it had generally been a good flight. The Lancaster Restoration Group were justifiably proud of their aircraft and were thus anxious to show it off. So on September 21st, from early morning, they played host to the media and generally went out of their way so that the Lancaster got the attention it rightfully deserved. Throughout the day, the Restoration Group members were busy conducting television, radio, and newspaper interviews and enjoying every minute talking about their pride and joy.
Only one flying in North America. As soon as there's a World War II bomber movie come to pass, I'm sure that we're going to be in it. But yeah, it's going to be very popular. It's being so unique. You know, it doesn't seem that long ago we saw them flying around. You know, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, that was in post-war. And now it's the one of two left flying in the world. I guess all the rest are in pots and pans. It's kind of interesting to see it go by and to hear the sound of those four Merlins. And I think that that's the way that's going to be presented across Canada and the United States, and that's why it's going to be so popular.
Although problems with the Lancaster's intercom system prevented it from flying that day, it still proved to be an excellent photo opportunity for the media that had gathered to see the Lancaster. With just one day to go before the official dedication ceremonies for the Mynarski Memorial Lancaster, activity at the museum intensified. Then, just before noon, the Lancaster was ready for engine startup. Throughout the day, the crew put her through her paces, much to the delight of the small crowd that had gathered. It was a beautiful autumn day as the gates opened at 9 a.m. Organizers were expecting maybe 8,000 to 9,000 people, but by showtime at 2 o'clock, over 20,000 people had gathered at Hamilton Airport to see the Lancaster take to the air. Parking was at a premium, and some had to park over 4 kilometers from the airport and walk. People had come from across Canada, the United States, and England to see the Lanc fly, and they were not going to be disappointed. With the plane fueled and ready, it was towed into position at center stage, ready for the show to begin. As the flight and ground crew made their final inspection of the aircraft, one last minor engine leak was attended to.
An Avro.
Avro. No sweat.
It's one that somebody, either Jim or I, are being accused of not tightening it up tight.
No heat.
You're going to stay here, John, eh?
Well, I have to. I'm holding it over. That's all.
On again! On the center! Quick! March!
At 2 o'clock, as an Air Cadet Honor Guard led in the dignitaries, the ceremonies got underway.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you the Master of Ceremonies for today's activities, Mr. Dennis Bradley.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the inaugural flight of FM 213, the new VR-A Lancaster. Surely the most massive aircraft restoration project ever undertaken in Canada, if not in the world. Canadian Warplane Heritage is proud to own this airplane and to have it as a memorial to the people who served in them, the people who built them, the people who maintained them, and of course, those who never came back. The aims and objectives of Canadian Warplane Heritage are to preserve in flying condition aircraft used by Canadians in World War II in Korea, both in training and combat. And this surely is the most significant aircraft that we have ever attempted and probably ever will attempt. The aircraft arrived here as a restoration project in 1979, after being donated to us by the Sully Foundation in Goderich, Ontario, and it was owned prior to that by the Canadian Legion in Goderich, Ontario. Thank the Lord that the people in Goderich looked after the aircraft properly, and when they stored it for display, did not destroy its integrity. Funding for this airplane has been provided by the Lancaster Support Club, a group within Canadian Warplane Heritage, and if you look around, any of the Lancaster Support Club members have an orange tag on. We'd like to support those people, over 4,000 in number, who have provided the cash that went along with the corporate donations of parts, radios, etc., to make this project, bring this project to fruition. So I salute you all, members of the Lancaster Support Club. I'd like to call on the Reverend Chuck Meaton now for the commissioning of the airplane.
Today is a day to remember the friends and loved ones, 60% of Bomber Command who did not come back. The Lancaster becomes a living symbol that we will not forget their sacrifices for us all. Today is a day to say thank you to the dedicated men and women who so lovingly brought her back to life with their careful work. Today is a day to celebrate the triumph of not giving up when money and spirits were low. The Mynarski Lancaster VR-A will fly.
And it is my privilege, on behalf of the Canadian Warplanes Heritage, the restoration crew, and people everywhere who are interested in vintage aircraft, to commission her. May she fly safely and not be afflicted by the elements or by mechanical failure. May she fly proudly and take with her all the memories of all who flew in combat and those who did not return. And may she stir the hearts of young and old across this nation, once built for war, who now comes in peace. And for all those who would rise up with wings of eagles, I commission her now to the duties of goodwill ambassador at home and abroad, for our Queen and for Canada. May God bless her and all who fly in her. Amen.
Thank you, Chuck. Wonder if I could have the two pilots come forward from today's flight. Stu and Bob. This is the axe from the original Lancaster that Andy Mynarski perished in. It's in the possession of 419 Squadron in Cold Lake, Alberta. They requested it be flown today in the inaugural flight of the airplane so it can be returned back to their collection in Cold Lake. So if you'd look after that, fellows, we appreciate it. I'd like to again say thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the program, which includes an hour and a half of flying and a lot of Lancaster photographic passes, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Thank you for joining us.
The Spitfire and Hurricane were certainly crowd pleasers, but for those packing the airport and jamming area roads, the Lancaster was what they had come to see. Then, as the Lanc started its roll down the runway, veterans, some of them crying, cocked their ears to hear the Merlin's distinctive roar. During World War II, the Lancaster shared with its contemporary, the Spitfire, the distinction of becoming a legend in its own time. And since the war, that legend has continued to grow, fostered by the numerous books and articles on the Lancaster, not to mention the recollections of the thousands of men who maintained and flew in Lancasters. The Mynarski Memorial Lancaster will continue to foster that legend in the years to come as it tours air shows throughout North America. But more than a legend, the Mynarski Memorial Lancaster will become a flying memorial to the thousands of men and women that came to know her from the drawing boards and manufacturing plants to the airfields of Britain and to the flak-filled skies over Germany. The Lancaster was an airplane that touched all these hearts and performed beyond expectation. She and the men who flew in her will be remembered forever.